So we're going to talk today about specifically education and in technology, and also the spread of internet through rural and low-income areas. And my guest today is Dana Blouin. That's how you say it, right?
Correct.
Blouin? Okay. And so, first of all, just kind of as an introductory question, it looks like you've moved around a lot according to your Google Plus profile, and I'm assuming you don't lie there. Tell me about yourself and kind of what you do now.
So yeah, I've lived a few different places. I grew up in Rhode Island. Grew up there, then I moved to Boston for a bit in the late 90s and early 2000s. Worked there. Worked for a .com there during the .com boom, and got my start in IT over there. And just moved around, lived in North Carolina, California. Then I ended up back in Rhode Island. I was working in telecommunications, and I'm a network engineer for a telecom company. Basically, design a lot of the network growth that we have, and I do a lot of work with the business side. And now I live currently in the Cleveland, Ohio area. So this is where I am, enjoying the nice snowy winter here in Cleveland.
So, moving up, and I was looking at your resume, kind of moving up from being I'll say lowly, but I don't mean that in a negative way necessarily, but you've moved yourself up in the ranks in the cable industry from a field service guy to a full-out on network engineer, and looks like you've gotten some education in the process to kind of help facilitate that. So, what has that been like in making that move?
Well, I ended up in the cable industry, like you said, as a field technician, basically going around installing cable boxes. Kind of at like a transitional point in my life. I was getting kind of frustrated. I had been working in IT for years and doing more help desk stuff and working really a lot of more contract-to-contract type of temp positions. I was just getting kind of frustrated, and I had a friend who was there who's like, oh, they just posted some jobs in field. If you're really looking for a change, why don't you check it out? So I did, and as opportunities became available within the industry, I just took advantage of it. But yeah, moving up, and I spent about a year doing field stuff, and then I ended up making the move over to the network operations side, and that was really where kind of growth took off, and every time there was an opportunity, I took advantage of it. Mm-hmm. And it's something I found interesting, and so I just stuck with it.
So tell me, I'm kind of curious about being a field service guy in cable, because I know in my experience with cable, and I have a different company than you work for, so I can bash them. The only guy I ever meet is that poor guy who has to come out to my house and fix the things that they tell me are not wrong over and over on the phone. Mm-hmm. And did you get a lot of were customers ever just really awful to you, or were they usually pretty receptive?
I probably only had, maybe I can think of like 2 instances where it was like really like a bad situation. And I didn't always work in like the best neighborhoods, mm-hmm. But and that's not, and the bad neighborhoods aren't where I had issues, oddly enough. They were always pretty happy to see you, because usually something's broken and you're there to fix it. And as long as you can fix it and you can kind of apply these troubleshooting skills to get through the issue, then people are very happy to have you there.
Right.
But it's like I said, there's probably 2 times that things got pretty sketchy, and it's not where you would expect it to have happened.
I can imagine. So we're going to kind of talk about this latest program that the FCC is. I think they're still working on how it's going to roll out, but from my understanding, they basically are starting to talk about providing low-cost internet access to underprivileged Americans, like they've done phone access before. I guess they probably did that in the 80s or 90s. I don't remember. But what do you think about the way that program is structured now, and what they could do to make it better?
I think the idea of a subsidy for connectivity is a great idea. That the government can step in and subsidize a certain class of people to be able to get access to the internet. That's phenomenal. My problem with it is it seems from all my research to kind of be lacking. It doesn't reach enough of the people, even in low-income areas. And like anything in the government, the process to get it's not easy.
Right.
But I think the big drawback there is that even if you start giving access and subsidizing access for low-income families, there's still a whole section of our population in the middle of America that doesn't have access to any infrastructure.
That's a good point. So the real problem in a lot of cases is lack of cables being run there, right?
Yeah. Well, it's because you can't expect a company to take a huge hit like that, to run miles and miles of fiber optic cable out to reach 2 customers.
Right.
And just the return on investment's not there. And in those situations, I mean, I think that's where the government needs to step in and try to either extend service or build their own type of municipal type of thing at a local level. And some communities have done that with municipal fiber builds and, municipal wireless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was going to say along those lines, in an ideal world, would you rather see government, run operations for cable like that? Because I know in some European countries they have things like that, and some of the more progressive ones. What would kind of be your ideal world situation for handling, internet access in these low-income, hard-to-reach areas?
Well, I mean, I think in anywhere where it's densely populated, anywhere where you have a good growth of people and it makes business sense, I think it's best to kind of let a company go in, because they're always going to be pushing technology to compete with other services. Mm-hmm. And that's the case, and they can make that investment. But for rural areas, I think it makes the most sense to either have the local government do it with subsidies from the federal government, or to have the residents build some type of co-op. I've seen both solutions used very well. In Vermont right now, they're actually trying to build almost a statewide kind of fiber municipally run service for the residents. And there's places in the Midwest where I know that they've actually have like co-op based stuff where people kind of work together, build point-to-point wireless links.
Huh, wow.
They're able to get like a limited type of services out to where it would never be feasible to run physical plant.
Right. And I think, this is something you probably agree with, that we're kind of seeing this trend in the move towards wireless internet access in some way, whether it's satellites. In some areas of the world, they've been talking about a satellite system that provides internet at a low cost. I know Google was talking about that at some point. Do you think that, I know that you're in the cable industry, so do you think that is something the cable industry is looking at a lot heavily now, or are they still kind of relying on the physical infrastructure that they've had for so long?
Obviously, there's a push towards, to service on mobile devices, IP-ready devices, and so you want to be able to provide service to those, but at the same time, right now the wireless infrastructure is not at a point where it can compete with, hardwired services as far as speed, quality of service, things like that.
Right.
So, and I think you're probably looking at 25 years away before we get to the point where those could even be comparable at a reasonable level to a consumer.
Right. And, talking about this and giving the government giving low-cost internet to people, it was recommended in, I think it was the, I can't remember, NATO's, one of NATO's talks, or the UN's talks, about giving, basically they recommended that internet access be a basic human right. What is your opinion on that? I mean, is it really something that every government should be required to give as a human right?
I don't think it's fair to say like internet access should be a human right. The way I think about it is more, or the way I like to think about it is that open access to information, free access to information should be a human right. I read the same NATO report that you're talking about. I think that what they're really trying to get at is the fact that governments shouldn't be allowed to shut off access to the internet to try and quell social uprising, or try to control a situation. They shouldn't be able to block off internet access like that, and that I completely agree with.
Right. That
I don't think the government should have the place to step in and say, oh, people are getting out of hand, this Twitter thing's out of control, let me shut it down. We're no better than countries like North Korea then if we do that, who control all information in and out of their country. If you can do it at a moment's notice, it's really just a threat to society.
Right. And, I don't know if you saw this today, but there was an article that Twitter is now going to allow countries to censor certain tweets if they'd like to, based on any number of criteria in their country. So that's pretty interesting, but at the same time, Twitter's not the only way people communicate online. So I think the big problem would be shutting down the internet entirely. If Twitter wants to cut its thing off, I mean, that's their problem. That's sort of their business. We can't tell them how to run their business.
That's fine. They'll censor political voices, but they'll let McDonald's ads run.
I think Twitter's under some pressure from investors to start making some money and being
Yeah.
But anyway, that's kind of off topic. I really wanted to get into, along with this, giving low-cost internet to people, and I think that the thing that's important about providing the internet to people who are underprivileged in America is that a lot of the times they're the people who need it the most. For example, looking for jobs. And nowadays, small newspapers, especially in rural areas, are going away, and so classifieds aren't what they used to be. But not only that, the ability to access information and education, as you talked about, is important. But what I'm wondering is there a problem with the way we teach people and how much we teach people about using the internet? In all honesty, I know people who barely know enough to get on a computer and type up a Word document, much less know the tools that they have at their fingertips if they had internet access. So what do you think about that in the education of technology like that?
No, I agree. It is scary sometimes how, you meet some people who just have no idea how to use technology at all. Actually, a quick example, I was actually at the dentist today, and my hygienist, probably in her mid-20s, told me that she just got her first email account like a year and a half ago. I mean, she couldn't have been more than like 26 years old. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking I had an email account in high school in '95, and I thought I was late to the game. But yeah, no, I agree that for a lot of things, basic computer literacy and literacy of information should really be a fundamental of education. And I try to, even though my son's young, I try to really kind of work on that with him all the time. Is how to use his iPad, how to use the computer, and just to play around with it, even just to get used to it, so he's always familiar with it. Mm-hmm. But I think a big part of that is, you're right, the people who are the poorest are really the ones who need it the most. And sometimes, I was thinking about this the other day. So I live in a nicer community, and I have a library here that has great access to the internet. Probably like 30 computers. Mm-hmm. But I can remember when I lived in Providence, Rhode Island, and it was a slightly more challenged financially area that I lived in. The local library there had only 3. Mm-hmm. And only one of them had internet access, and it was crazy.
Yeah.
And I think you see that in probably a lot of more rundown communities, more financially financially challenged communities that don't have the resources to put into that. And so I think that's really something that, even if you can't get internet access to every person, to be able to fund access to public areas and public places, so people have a place to go to use it at least, would be a great first step.
Right. And and beyond just teaching people, this kind of transitions from, I guess this is our transition point from internet access for everyone to the educational system and how it deals with teaching technical education or science education, math education. So beyond just teaching people how to use computers to the extent that they can Google effectively and use monster.com or whatever else they need to use to get a job and learn technology, what do you think about the state of technical education in the U.S.?
I think it varies far too much from location to location. I mean, I've known people who came out of high school with, CCNP certifications and, Microsoft certifications, and were very well versed in technology. And, I've met younger people, like I said today, who was 26, who just got her first email account. And that staggers my mind that you can have, 2 completely separate realms of individuals that came through education in the same country. I mean, it just varies far too greatly. Yeah,
no, I definitely could see that. And, you and I and a lot of the people that are generally in this group probably are people who have seen the need for a certain amount of technical training. I mean, we've learned to use Google+, so we're probably, I'm going to guess, pretty connected and into how the internet works and how technology works. But we have a real problem with a mismatched skill set in this country, and maybe even just a lack of skill in general. There was an article that came out when I was working at Siemens Healthcare that said that they would love to hire more U.S. workers, but they literally couldn't find people with the skills, the technical skills that they needed. So they're outsourcing or pulling people from China or India. What can we do to fix this? Like, what can the government do, or should the government do anything to help train more technically minded people?
Simple. Train them when they are kids. I mean, it's kind of like language. I mean, if you teach them a language at an early age, i.e. a second or a third language, they'll grasp maybe a fourth or fifth by the time they're 20.
Right. Matt, I completely agree with you, and I imagine that Dana probably will too. Just to let you guys know, for all of you who've come in, so what I generally do in these Hangouts is I pick one featured guest each week, and I'm just going to ask him a few more questions, and then we're going to do an audience thing. So, no offense, Matt, I would love to hear your opinion, but wait about 5 minutes for me.
Yeah, I'm all for, with our jobs issue right now, I mean, I'm all for, the government getting involved and really trying to, put money in education. I'd much rather see us spend trillions of dollars on developing our, community colleges and junior colleges and all of our, public universities than spend trillions of dollars on war in any country. Or funding, wars between Israel and Palestine or anywhere. That's my personal opinion. Mm-hmm. I think our president currently is on the right track with trying to get skill development programs in community colleges and get them to kind of meet what the community needs, what that local area needs. I actually heard a commercial earlier this week for a technical school here in Ohio. They're building like 3 casinos here in Ohio, which is a different thing altogether. But right in Cleveland, they're building like one downtown. And our local community college, which people call Tri-C, Cuyahoga Community College, is they're holding these classes. And I guess the company that is building the casino is kind of funding them along with some government subsidies that the school's using to build these training programs that are guaranteeing people jobs. And they're doing everything from IT to security to table games at a different number of schools. So the community college is doing IT and like law enforcement for their security personnel. And then they have some for-profit school that they've contracted to train people to do table games like roulette or poker or whatever. But I think it's good that they're putting it into the community and getting money into education and training. Despite the fact that I think it's probably a poor place to put jobs. But this part of the country has its own kind of job void anyway. Yeah. Where industry went away. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think to develop programs at the community college level that can help people get on to employment and maybe into a 4-year university somewhere to retrain with different skills is a great way to go.
It's interesting because I almost think that a lot of these things should be taught at a high school level. And not to knock community colleges at all, I totally agree with you on they should teach more of this stuff. Mm-hmm. But in the city of Memphis, which is a really impoverished area where I grew up, the public schools had a campaign running where they said they wanted to prepare every student for college. Now let's get real here for a minute. I don't want to say that these kids are not smart enough or not, couldn't, besides the fact they probably couldn't pay for school. What I want to say is, why are we telling every student that you're not ready to get a job after high school? They should be, right? I mean, it's just my opinion. But I'm, curious what kind of things at the high school level would be good to add to our education curriculum.
Well, I think if you're starting at the high school level, at that point of primary education, if you're starting at high school, you're starting too late. Mm-hmm. If there's a big problem in our country, I think, with math skills, science skills. I have a number of cousins who are younger than me who are smart kids, but I just when you see like the type of math that they were taught and how far they had to go in math. It's crazy. And, not just them. I worked with a guy who told me he didn't even take algebra in high school. That blew my mind. I didn't know that you didn't have to take calculus.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to think that.
Well, is some of the problem, in your opinion, that we don't value teachers enough? And when I say that, I mean that we don't compensate them on a level that's even close to what a well-educated, like, engineer or computer science major would get in industry.
That's definitely true. I think the way teachers' compensation and the teaching industry in general is broken, the way it works. I don't agree with and this might, I know this probably steps against a lot of my more progressive views and liberal tendencies, but I personally don't think that teachers should be unionized and have those protections that keep them in place regardless of what kind of teacher they are, and that keep their pay standardized. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I think a great teacher should be paid a lot more than they are, and teachers should be paid based on performance. Like at a regular job, anyone who works knows if you do your job well and you perform, you're going to get better raises, you're going to get promotions, unless you're a union worker. I mean, and I have friends who are union workers who love their jobs, and but they have the same job for life. There's no incentive there for them to better themselves. Mm-hmm. And I know people who are great teachers and who, just can't get jobs. They're smart individuals. They're bright. And one of my friends, he has 2 master's degrees, actually. He had to go back for a second one because he couldn't get a teaching job after graduate school. He had been subbing all the way through grad school, couldn't get work. Subbed for a few more years, got frustrated, kept getting turned down in interviews, and ended up going to be a trainer for a company. Right. Now he makes a 6-figure salary, and he would never go back to teaching, but he's great at teaching. He's a great trainer.
Yeah. I mean, he would never make a 6-figure salary as a teacher. No. It would be rare, extremely rare.
That's crazy. Why shouldn't a great teacher make a 6-figure salary?
I agree. Yeah.
And why should they come into a profession that pays them $30,000 a year at some places, and less at some places as a starting teacher? Yeah. If you have a 4-year degree, there should be an expectation of a livable wage.
Right. And well, it's really hard, when we're talking about attracting good teachers for science and mathematics. The thing that really gets me is that, say I'm an engineering student, job opportunities for me when I come out of college, if I were looking for a job, be $50,000, $60,000 a year minimum. There's just no way around it. I couldn't even teach at any sort of school without taking 2 more years of classes, and then I'd make half of what I would in industry as an engineer.
Yeah, and a $50,000, $60,000 a year job as an engineer is if you foggled your way through school with C's and D's and just scrape by with your engineering degree, you'd still land a good job. Right,
and it's not to say that I've considered teaching it many times, and that may be something I do at some point. But it's not to say that you should just expect to make exactly as much as you would in industry. But $20,000, $30,000 a year is not even livable. Hardly.
But you got to think of the skill set that teachers have. Mm-hmm. And not just I'm talking everywhere from an English teacher, an art teacher, to a science and math teacher. They all have these skills that they can, relate information to people. They all have skills, to use technology because, they have to be able to get online, do research. I try to, interact with my son a lot as far as, and everything we do tries to be a learning experience. From him being a little kid, his first toy was an abacus that I bought him. And even just to use it for counting. We do little stupid science projects. Well, I shouldn't say stupid, but, little kind of small-scale science projects around the house. He had a laptop since he was 1, even though he didn't know how to use it, just to move the mouse around. I got him an iPad just to try to integrate him with technology. So obviously something like the iPad's easy. It's incredibly intuitive. He just jumped right on it and started playing cut the rope right away. But I just try to expose him to as much technology as possible, expose him to as much math, science, literature as possible, read to him every night. We're raising my son bilingual. My wife's Thai, so we speak both Thai and English in the house.
Very cool.
And actually, they're both in Thailand right now, and he's actually going to school in Thailand, taking some classes here and there. Just kind of like preschool type stuff, but still just to interact and develop his language skills, his thinking skills, anything. I just think it's important as a parent to be involved in education. I mean, the teachers do, what they do at school, and that's great. But if I don't do my part as a parent at home, my wife doesn't do her part as a parent at home, then we're failing them. We're not picking up the other piece of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Yeah, well, that's all I have for you as far as questions go. So, and I apologize for cutting you off earlier, Matt. I do want to hear your opinion. So, anybody else, now is the time to either ask questions or put in your own input for the next 30 minutes. So whoever's got anything to say, go for it.
Well, I was going to mention something about, you talked about the education system. Oh, can you hear me? My lag?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, so you were talking about the education system earlier, and that's something, I live in Idaho, and we had them tackle this exact thing of teachers not being paid enough, and the whole union thing of which in a way limits the amount that a teacher can get paid, because everybody gets paid the same no matter what, regardless of performance. And so they went through and said, okay, there's going to be no more, that you're no longer going to be able to be guaranteed a job, and they're going to give bonuses to teachers based on performance. So if a teacher does well, the students, really like the teacher, there's whatever, they test well, things like that, they get bonuses every year. And so the unions really fought that, and they went against it, and they were picketing him every day, going out onto schools and signing petitions and saying that this is the worst. They wanted to recall him from his position, and they just got the numbers back. And this year in our funding, the schools have all the funding they need because of the reforms. And then they had, I think, 60-something million in bonuses that they're giving out to the teachers this year, above and beyond when before they were in deficits. And and they're doing more technology-based training to where for the small, because we have a lot of small towns that, as you said, they don't have internet, they don't have all these things, so they're doing remote learning for those students for advanced courses that they couldn't get in those towns. And little things like that, the teachers fought, and I don't think it's necessarily the teachers, I think the unions then telling the teachers what to believe or what to say. We're saying that, no, this is wrong, you can't replace a teacher. Well, they're not replacing teachers. The small towns cannot afford to have a teacher in every subject, or there's someone who's not qualified maybe to teach specialty classes. And, it's turning around to be something that worked out very well, and so this is something hopefully that around the country, if a teacher does really well, they're not guaranteed their job, but if they do well, they're guaranteed to make more money than they would have, and I think that's something that to what you were saying, that's how our state kind of answered that.
I think that's an awesome solution. Giving teachers bonuses for performing is a great idea. And it's something that they deserve, and they should get paid a good amount. And I think the remote learning for school systems that might not have the resources to have a teacher for every subject, but now you have students who aren't suffering because of that, because of technology. They're able to get access and get remote learning from a teacher in a more advanced subject. That's great.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, go ahead, Christian.
I think for us, Generation X and Ys, that are straddling kind of the era between the baby boomers, and we still experience our parents, the way our parents grew up and were able to earn a living. But what we have to recognize is that most industrialized nations, meaning the first world countries, are moving from the 70s, moving away from manufacturing and producing and more towards a technology and service industry. We have to come to grips that jobs are going to change, and we're seeing that. We're basically in the transition, exacerbated by the economic downturn that we have been experiencing since 2008. I think our labor force should be as swift as our technological pace and keep up with that. Meaning our economy is moving to a two-branch economy, those that create and those that service. And as we move away from building, that's where our economic reality lies. In that sense, high schools should go back to what they used to be in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, where when you got to high school, they also prepare you some sort of trade track in a polytechnic sense. We should be teaching. I agree with you, Carl, that it sounds good in slogans. Every kid should go to college, but I disagree with that. Not every kid should go to college for simple facts. Not every kid has the ability, and maybe not every kid is in their best economic interest to go to college, but more to our vocational training. Given the fact that our economy is moving to this two-track economy, the creators and the servicers. Having said that, I agree that schools should have more flexibility as far as what they need to teach to benefit the citizens of their area. Once you get to, you get past the core classes that we all know should be taught to make a very round individual, we also should dedicate some time to teach those kids vocational training. There are career tracks, there are not college tracks, there are vocational tracks that make quite more money than many college graduates can make. A diesel mechanic can make upwards of $100,000 a year. That's not something that you need to go to college for.
Yeah, I was gonna say a vocational training in just basic computer programming, as opposed to I'll pick on English, an undergraduate English degree. Money-wise, it's where's the disadvantage there? But
if we take that vocational training and tailor it to industries that are in the area, automobile manufacturing, computer centers, repairs, and servicing for data centers, things of that nature, I think that we would solve a lot of the jobs problem that we're experiencing today, and help those communities and some of those citizens that are economically challenged.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add to the two-track idea is that we need to make sure we teach our vocational track that their vocation may change based on technology and where things go next.
But that's what I'm saying. In a swift educational and economic system, you're able to accommodate those changes quicker than suggesting somebody change their vocation and go to a 4 or 5 years worth of training as opposed to months of training. Mm-hmm. You're able to take those positions that have been made obsolete and kind of transition those people into other positions by accelerating the training and breaking away from the traditional mold of traditional education, the 4-year undergrad, the 2-4-year graduate, and such things.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, Christian, I think that's a great point. And I completely agree with one of the first statements you said, that it sounds great that every student should go to college, but not every student has to. I have a friend in Rhode Island who there's one vocational school in the whole state of Rhode Island. And we were in high school around the same time. I was a year ahead of him. And he was at the vocational school. I actually went to a private school. But he graduated. He did his apprentice as an electrician while he was in high school. He went to a vocational program to be an electrician. He graduated high school when I was in my first year of college. He got out of high school making like $50,000 a year working as an electrician.
Correct.
Now, and now he owns his own business. He has 4 electricians that work for him. Does very well. Mm-hmm. And he never went to college ever. Never even thought about it.
But he did have the vocational training to supplant that college education.
Mm.
Right. But I would trust him wiring my house more than any of my electrical engineering friends.
No, absolutely. I have friends who are electrical engineers. I've seen them wire stuff. It's not pretty.
David, you're chatting away. It's your turn to talk.
I'm taking notes. See, this is where I can write my notes down.
I got you.
And now I can be thinking about this thing. So let me go to the top of my list here.
Okay.
I guess the first point that I was thinking early in my chat was my wife's a principal. She's a very, very, very good principal. She's been doing it for a long time. Her mother was Tennessee Principal of the Year for the state of Tennessee, so they're all about teaching. So I live and breathe this stuff. And we were talking about earlier, I have some Moodle servers where we have online courses, so administer online training. My observation is that you can't find enough teachers who are really good, like my wife, to fill a classroom. You can barely find enough that are good moderators or mentors, or facilitator, I guess would be a good word. And that's the direction that I'm thinking classrooms need to be, where you have online learning, you have very, very good teachers putting together videos and interactive learning curriculum and make it available to the whole United States. I mean, this is not done at a local level, but it's done at a national level with a core curriculum, and that the teachers become facilitators of that course, because that's the best we can expect out of these folks. You can't find enough people who you can be great teachers to fill every single classroom, and we expect them to all be great teachers. It's just not possible.
Right.
So that's the first thought, and then back on the 2 tracks. When I was in manufacturing, I was on a board. It's about 15 years ago, where I was advising the school, which was right next door, and it was a technical school. It was a high school, but it was their technical branch where they were doing a 2-track. And they said, okay, guys, if you really want to study computers over here, if you want to study beautician, if you want to be a beautician, if you want to be a nurse or some other thing over here, then you go over here. You're not going to college, right? And all those people left the high school, and they weren't necessarily the flunkies by any means. They were just people who said, no, I'm not going to go to college because I can't afford it, or because I don't want to go. And the problem ended up being the parents said, no, you don't tell my child you're not going to go to college. And the parents they hated it.
Yeah.
And so it just kind of flopped. But that was back before we learned that, Bill Gates never went to college, finished college. So I think now there are more real life cases and more situations where, I don't care about college, I just want them to get a job.
Yeah.
If they can learn some trade and get a job, I'm going to be happy about it. So maybe it's time to revisit that.
Well, the problem is, I see it from the standpoint of somebody in college, is that when, I guess like my friends who are not in college, that either didn't go or dropped out, they almost tell me that with like shame, like they did something wrong in their life. And let's be honest here. I'm not rich, and I'm not gonna be rich just because I went to college. And it's something that we tend to, our society devalues people who don't complete this certain next step in their education. And I think that's completely wrong, because like you said, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, great examples of non-college educated people.
Absolutely correct. And the thing is that you can be a graduate and a student, or have a graduate a degree and have a master's, and still be waiting tables like half the people in my neighborhood. So,
right.
So the thing is, there's a lot of vocations out there that provide for a high standard of living. We're talking about 6 figures, income a year. Those are programs that are accessible, they're in need, they're fairly quick as compared to a 4-year degree, and it's this slogan mentality that we have in this country, that we latch to a slogan, and basically if anybody deviates from that, you're not fitting in with the group, you're devalued, like Carl said. The question is, what is going to be most beneficial for that particular student or that particular citizen coming up to our education system? Is the most beneficial thing for that student going to be going to a 4-year traditional degree, or is it going to be having a vocation to fulfill the economic need in their area? Not so much today, but most people die. They are born, live, and die within 10 square miles of where they're born. So most people, especially in rural areas, are not willing to move outside of those areas that they know. So we need to train these kids to fulfill the economics needs of the area, whether that be agricultural, whether that be a service, manufacturing, or high technology. And tailor those educational programs in the best way to help those areas. Now, we can't expect institutions, four-year institutions that have been established to make those changes swiftly. But community colleges, on the other hand, are very well equipped to make those changes swiftly. And we need our educators and the people in the education system, both in primary, secondary, and high-level education, need to recognize the trend in shifting our economy. This is not a manufacturing economy anymore. Those jobs, like Steve Jobs says, those jobs are never coming back. You know, when it makes sense, like automobile manufacturing, you have those jobs, but those are 2,000 or 3,000 jobs at the max. But those manufacturing jobs are not coming back. They're staying in Southeast Asia. They're staying in emerging economies like Brazil, where labor is still cheap and technology is still expensive.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else have anything to add to any of those points?
Well, how if no country's going to have an an industrial economy, right? How is it going to sustain for the next, 100 years?
I'm not suggesting that no country is going to have an industrial, manufacturing economy. I'm merely suggesting that we're in a global economy. So, for example, Apple is an American company, and no products that Apple sells in the U.S. or around the world are manufactured in the U.S. They're all manufactured in the southeast region of the world. From your accent, I assume that you are in the UK. ARM is a British company. ARM hasn't produced the first chip yet. They just licensed the technology. So what I'm saying is, technologically advanced countries are still going to create products, inventions. They're going to create the technology, but they're not necessarily going to be manufactured in those countries, because the cost that we're willing to pay as consumers, we're not willing to pay the cost that it would for a product that it would cost to be produced in countries with high labor wages.
Yeah, and that's going to, I mean, no matter what happens in Southeast Asia, because I think they're going through a bit of an industrial revolution and a bit of I think their economies are going to get stronger. It's going to keep moving to whatever part of the world is cheap. I mean, this is how it works. It's like,
yeah.
It's how manufacturing, when it was just a U.S., process, we built everything here. We moved it to parts of the U.S. where it made the most sense. I mean, it's going to happen worldwide.
And the same thing's happening right now in, like, I can speak specifically to Thailand. My wife's from there. We have property there. I have ties to that country. One of my brother-in-laws is a engineer, a college-educated engineer there, and he actually works for a Japanese company that manufactures chipsets. Mm-hmm. And he basically oversees their entire operation in Jantabri, where they're just pumping out chips all the time. And it's cheap. He makes a good living because of what he does there, but for the average worker, they make an okay living, by Thai standards, but it allows us to buy great gadgets at good prices. I mean, that's just what it is. Yeah. In Cambodia, which I've spent some time in, they do a lot of textile manufacturing, and they actually have a large lobby in Washington to try and ease restrictions on imports from Cambodia for textiles for that very reason. They're trying to hinge their entire economy on taking over textiles, whether it be slacks, T-shirts. They even want to do custom clothing over there. They have factories set up like overnight for that type of stuff, and it's cheap. And in Cambodia, they can pay people pennies.
Correct.
And we can buy a $5 T-shirt here with a Pac-Man on it.
The average high-tech factory worker in an industrialized nation makes right around $30 an hour. Mm-hmm. The average high-tech factory worker in Southeast Asia makes about $12 a day. So it's just economics,
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great point. It is. And, unfortunately, where I'm living currently in Cleveland, there's a lot of people who lost manufacturing jobs, not in the high-tech sector, but automotive and in Akron, particularly rubber. People who lost jobs in those sectors and need to be retrained. Though we have a large section of people in their probably 40s and 50s who still need to work but don't have skills to earn a living.
Correct.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've talked to some people who have been displaced, that their jobs completely eliminated, in the southeast and in other parts of the country, and I've seen them with two distinct attitudes. One group of them that I talked to, they say, yeah, I'm ready to get trained on something new. I've got to keep going, and they find a way to make it happen, whatever it is. But it does seem also that I've seen from a lot of people, they put a lot of blame on the government or outsourcing or big companies. They tend to push the blame onto anyone but themselves. How is there any way to come on, we're America.
Yeah.
Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right?
Yeah, get that American spirit, right?
I think that once you spend, a number of years doing a certain job or a certain position, an element of fear comes to it. For example, my mother is one of those people that has been were displaced 2 years ago after being with one company for 18, 19 years, and hasn't been able to find employment, but not really looking that hard either. So luckily they are in a position where my mother can go without working. But my mother fairly young still, 62. And still has some productive years behind her and plenty of experience, but very specialized experience. Experience that she can't take to just any other industry and apply it there. So I guess it's different for us that we're young to kind of that we see as the glass half full. We're always looking for that next field to get into and have a lot of passion and a lot of enthusiasm. But for people that are older, it's a different mindset. The mindset, like I was saying before, the mindset of the baby boomer and their parents, where you worked a job for 30, 40 years and you worked hard and then you got to retire. And you were extremely loyal to one entity, one company, one enterprise. You identify yourself as a foreman or as a Chevy man,
Yeah.
or as a Boeing guy, So I guess it's up to us to kind of bring them along and kind of show them that it's a different world. The world changed while they were taking a nap.
I can kind of relate to that the mentality though. If you do something for so long and you're kind of at the twilight of your career, it's a scary prospect to look at a new employment. So I'm a network engineer. 30 years from now, I'm 60, but I still want to work. And network engineering is no longer needed. Telecommunications is gone. It's all outsourced to another country and run remotely. I would be nervous at 60 years old. What job am I going to get that is going to take advantage of my 40 years of experience? It'd be a very scary prospect. At that point, what would I do?
And what will I hire you instead of the 20-year-old coming behind you?
Exactly.
Well, my mentality, and once again, I'm young, so I have the glass half full for sure attitude. But one thing I think we should maybe start thinking about encouraging is employers to teach or someone to help teach older workers whose jobs are that industry sector is moving something new. And I don't know what that entails, but we don't offer any kind of, it's sometimes without warning that these jobs go away, or at least it seems like it. But if we really kept up with the industry, there would probably be one. So I don't know.
I don't remember the specifics of this example, but there was a company, I believe they were a Microfleece manufacturer, and somehow their patent was broken, and someone was able to take the manufacturing technology that they used. They ended up going out of business. And I remember from the news story that they had put aside money into a trust for all the employees that they had to let go for them to go back to school and get retrained to do something else. I think that's a great example of a company taking responsibility for people in their own community, their employment. But I can't see every company doing that. I mean, obviously Enron didn't do that when they went under, right?
Yeah.
No, and even companies that are offering severance packages, they are in essence time to find. They give you time to find other employment or get retrained. The problem is that when you have families that a single individual, is easier to make those changes than when you have a family. You know, you have mouths to feed and a mortgage to pay and those kind of things. Your flexibility is less. But to Carl's point, that's a pipe dream. Companies are not going to announce when they're going to let you go, because if they do that, then they lose, those positions for the time they do need them, and they can't replace them because they're about to eliminate them. So, they never give you any warning. The concept of job security in this economy is smoke.
And I think that's one thing I definitely see in my generation of people coming out of school. We are much more aware of the fact that we will work for more than 1 or 2 or 5 different companies before we get to that retirement goal. For the general student, and even maybe especially in engineering, because it's a technology-based area, to move up, a lot of times you have to move out these days. So there's very little loyalty towards employers, but they haven't earned it, so I don't feel bad for them.
Correct.
Yeah.
I'll work for 5 companies before I get to the end of the year.
Well,
to Christian's point, though, we're to go not into the whole thing about people needing to retrain. Something, David, you had mentioned earlier on when we first started. We were talking, kind of chatting about iTunes U and the courses available there, and they offer free. I actually have the iTunes U app on my iPad, and it's much easier now to browse just the educational section than it was before, when you had to go into the iPad and go into iTunes and look at everything.
Yeah.
But there are resources available to people, and I think kind of to tie this back into everything that we kind of started out talking about was, if people don't have access to technology, don't have access to the internet, and don't have the knowledge base to utilize it, then they're not going to be able to take advantage of some opportunities, or even know about opportunities that are free for them to better themselves and to kind of pull themselves up out of a bad situation and to get there.
Excellent point. The Khan Academy, MIT's recent effort to put every single thing they offer degrees for online, where you're able to get a certificate, not a degree, but a certificate of completion. So basically, you can attend MIT, take advantage of everything that is taught in the classrooms, and at the end of it, get a certificate. I think those are great initiatives. I applaud MIT for taking, they started this whole concept 20 years ago, and I applaud them for doing that, because it enables somebody in the middle of nowhere to be able to get an education if they can, if they're one of those people that can actually learn without, without having somebody present, a teacher.
mm-hmm.
And thank you for being our guest this week.
Yeah. And I'm gonna wrap it up, I guess, because it's about that time, and we've all got other things to do. It's Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Dana, thank you for coming on, and to everybody here who stuck through the whole thing, and to everybody who